Well, after a lovely weekend on a typically grey Monday. So what we're going to be covering today is partly a recap of some of the stuff. I think sometimes with this, well, with most things really, it's the repetition sometimes that helps. A little bit of being reminded. I'm a big sort of fan of spaced repetition for learning, so kind of recovering things and going back over them just to make sure that everyone understood it first time round. And because one thing that's also certainly true for your talks is you're not going to have everyone's attention for 100% of the time. So there is a we'll come to that in a little bit. So I'm going to do a little bit of a recap um, and just add a few extra new bits in there. Um, and we're going to do a couple of exercises. And that's really going to take about an hour and a half. And then really we're going to be doing some breakout rooms depending on how you responded to the WhatsApp group poll about whether we're going to sort of break into, well, we're not going to break into three rooms. We're going to have three um, sort of, I suppose, discussion groups depending on how how you're feeling about the stage your talk is at. So we're gonna have one that's basically you still kind of haven't really settled on an idea. We are going to do one that's kind of you've decided, but you still need some guidance on structure and focus. And then we'll also do one on for those who've kind of know what they want to talk about. They've kind of written a first draft. They just have maybe some more specific questions. And we'll do these kind of group discussions, um, but they will be one after another because obviously I can only be in one at a time. So those will come after about 10:30, something like that. But for the first hour or so, we're just gonna do a little bit of a recap and do a few little simple exercises just to try and get ourselves back into it. So, again, I'm gonna throw a lot at you, same as the first one, really. It's up to you to take what works and what doesn't work. The reality is that there is no such thing as a one size fits all perfect guide for the perfect talk. Everyone will need to take what works for them in terms of structure, format, content, and also just to sort of, everyone's different, right? Everyone, the way people deliver is different, and there's just no such thing as a perfect talk. So I do want to emphasize that, you really want to be getting this stuff nailed down sooner rather than later to give you time to practice. And practice doesn't just look like standing in front of a mirror, repeating it time after time after time. It means kind of dropping ideas into conversations, seeing how people respond, using little elements, maybe sharing sort of micro parts of it whilst you're queuing for a cuppa sometime. So um, let's have a quick scroll back to the first session. Anyone, you can either put in the chat or put your hand up or whatever, but can they remember what we discussed about Sir Ken Robinson's talk and what we learned from that? Just pop it in the chat or put your hand up or whatever, however you feel. I'll keep an eye on the chat. I think we talked about him being quite funny, which obviously is a natural thing for him. He had obviously comes with the being blessed with some good charisma. And one point I always make to people is that because of his childhood polio, he's very, very still. He's not doing this kind of thing that we talk about with sort of TED Talks and whatnot. He's not prowling the stage. He's not sort of coming with loads of big energy. Let's check the chat. No one's got anything they remember about his talk.
A couple of hands though, Neil. Sorry to interrupt. We've got Keris with a hand
Oh,
up,
have we? Oh, I
and
couldn't
then
see.
Laura.
Oh, I can't see raised hands. I'll maybe have to scroll through. Oh, there we go. Go on then,
That's I
Laura.
can keep an eye on them for you if you like.
Oh, okay, go on then. Yeah, go on, Laura. You go first, and then Keris. Oh,
Can you hear me?
yes, yeah,
Can you hear me now?
yeah.
Fabulous. No, I was just going to say that he spoke, from what I remember of him, like you said, he was very still, but also he spoke really slowly. And it was also as if he was talking mid-conversation. So it's like you'd walked past him and he was mid-conversation with someone and then he kind of caught you, as opposed to being like, "Hi, I'm doing a presentation." It was much more relaxed than that. It was a lot more kind of naturally evolving way of
That's really
talking.
interesting. Yeah, I've never heard anyone describe it like that. But yeah, that's a really good point. It was very conversational, wasn't it? It was just he I seem to he asked lots of kind of rhetorical questions, sort of, am I right? You know, and look, does anyone notice that? You know, kind of quite yeah, that's a really good point actually. Thanks, Laura. Yeah, I really like that. Anything else? Keris, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, hi. Um, I think what I remember of it, and it does feel like a long time ago now, is that he told stories that sort of made him seem quite human and relate. It was stories that kept coming. They weren't sort of amorphous. They had a point. They always came back to what he wanted to talk about. So the story sort of dragged you in, and whilst he was an expert, he felt quite friendly and
Mm.
relatable.
Yeah, and those stories very much sort of served his central point, right? So, yes, yeah, he was very yeah, he talked about his family and that kind of stuff. So yeah, great, yeah, really, really good. Anybody else got their hands up? No, okay. So, um, yeah, I mean, another thing is also, you guys won't have slides, and he gave the sort of most popular sort of TED talk of all time, one of the most popular talks online ever. Without any slides, there were no pictures of cats, there were no memes, no graphs or animations. It was just him. Um, what does everyone remember about Joe Smith and his hand washing presentation? Firstly, does anyone shake and fold? There we go. Yeah, exactly. Um, does anyone think about this when they wash their hands anymore? Is this something that has stuck with people? See a few nodding heads. Um, it's bad, isn't it? Because I first saw this talk 10, 15 years ago, and I always think about it. And very often I find myself grabbing a load of paper towels and I kind of almost feel his disapproving look as I'm sort of grabbing 5 or 6 towels in a rush to dry my hands as quickly as possible. Yeah, everyone's sort of saying shake and fold. Yeah, it's great, isn't it? And it's a short talk, and it's really simple talk. And we'll come back to that kind of shake and fold thing in a bit as an example of a sort of something that stuck in people's minds. Um, but he changes behavior, right? So even, he's not on, I don't know, I've never heard of him outside of this context of this talk, but if you think of all the millions of people who've watched his talk and we know that it's had an impact on us, then he's had a global impact. There's no doubt about it. Even if all of us have just taken one less paper towel on 1 out of 10 occasions, he's had a global impact. Um, and it was a good natured, it was funny, it was silly, whatever. Um, and also his talk was, I think, like 4 or 5 minutes from memory. So, don't be under any illusions that if you do something right, you can't have a good big impact. Um, and then finally, what did we notice about the Obama sort of animation, the big sort of animation with the his sort of rallying cry, fired up, ready to go. Anybody got any thoughts on that? I mean, apart from I saw a good video this weekend of him at some Chicago voting booth, uh, and his off the cuff kind of comments and joking with people reminded me of the glory days of having a human in the White House. Um, Let's go. Mwape, you've got a comment.
Yes, I think what stuck with me about the Obama talk was mostly that I would say it had a tempo or a rhythm. Sort of, there were times when it was just you listening, and there were times when there was a sort of call to action when you want to get up and do something, or you just kind of like so motivated. Um, and there was always that sort of like ask behind his talk. I think that that's what sort of stuck with me.
Yeah, and he definitely so one thing I should say is actually that that particular animation, the audio from that is edited together from several different speeches across various cities in America. But one thing that is very noticeable is how he changes his tone, his energy. He brings more to, and he gets louder and more
Yeah.
energetic. Yeah, and I think somebody else mentioned in the comments, that repetition, the fired up, ready to go. He, must say that 10, 15 times, and then he gets the crowd into it, and that kind of repetition. We saw with Joe Smith as well, shake and fold, like repetition. Like I say, I'm one of the reasons I'm kind of doing a quick run through now is repetition, right? It can really help. You're not going to have people's attention and focus 100% of the time, even just in a short 4 or 5 minute talk. Um, so, but the one thing we discuss really is the really the main thing that bound all of these things together and what makes them so powerful is stories. Um, they don't necessarily need to rely on gimmicks. It's stories that really make a difference because human brain is completely hardwired for stories. We remember things better this way. I think I used the example in the first workshop of like if I say to you, don't eat those berries over there. That's a statement, But if I say to you, uh, Abby and Bryn ate those berries over there, and then they spent 6 weeks in hospital. You're gonna, that's a story, right? That has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And while I would never obviously wish that, it was just like it's much more memorable. It sticks with you. It has humanity at heart. It has characters. It has. I just noticed Stevie Wonder keeps on getting. I don't know if that's just me, but it's almost like he's flashing on. And is that happening for everyone else, or is it just for me? Is kind of going up. Okay, sorry, I just got really distracted by it. It's almost like my picture behind me was kind of flashing. Um, so yeah, our human brains are wired for story, and we all will know stories that we were told as children. We may not have heard them for 20 years, but we all remember the story of the hare and the tortoise and the boy who cried wolf, right? These are powerful morality tales, but there's a reason they're wrapped in story. It's because we remember them that way. And it just allows you to step into the shoes of another human being in a way that just facts just don't, right? And again, it's considered by some people as an evolutionary advantage. Um, uh, Operating as a group is only really possible through storytelling, right? So it's our evolutionary advantage. We can say, right, as a group, we're going to go over there. As a, when JFK sort of gave his speech about going to the moon, he was telling a story, and that cooperative ability came about through story. Um, And then we had a quick look at this famous or this clever example of a plastic horse head that was sold for, something like a couple of hundred times what it was a couple of thousand times maybe. So I think it seemed to remember this journalist he bought a load of items at basically a junk store. This one was like a couple of cents. It was like a horse's head. Cost him like less than $1, and he sold it for like 60 something dollars. So because he had assigned a story to it, so he got storytellers to write stories on eBay for each of the bits of tat that he'd bought, and was able to sell them based on the story. And because of the story, he was able to sell it for $63, whereas actually only really he bought it for like less than $1. The story itself was something about his parents having met at veterinary school, and this was a gift from one to the other after a particularly gruesome but weird horse dissection that resulted in them having an amorous moment in the cupboard when the lecturer wasn't watching. Like, I can't remember the exact story, but it was kind of crazy. Um, and that story is what imbued it with value. It took it from being a 99-cent piece of plastic tat to a amazing part of somebody's personal history. Um, and the research has been done. We're going to hear in a bit from Nancy Duarte. She has done a load of research on this around the makeup of TED Talks. And also, I just want to say also, and I did say this originally, but I just want to reiterate it. We talk a lot about TED Talks as kind of the gold standard, but um, I do want to remind you that they're in some respects an unattainable goal. So lots of TEDx talks. So the difference being TED Talks are chosen by the main organization. There's a conference once or twice a year. It's the very best of the best of the best. The TEDx talks, there's TEDx wherever, whether that's there's lots and lots of well, there's thousands I think all over the world, and they're run by sort of local volunteers, what I did for years with TEDx Cardiff. But what I do want to let you know is the most famous ones you see will have been very heavily rehearsed. They will have been edited most probably, and they may have been done a couple of times for edit points. I remember when I went to TED Global in Geneva, a couple of times speakers stumbled over their words. And what was really noticeable is they didn't just do what would have been natural. So if I said, "Our top TED Talks contain at least 50% stories," and blah 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 blah, and then I stumbled over my words, I wouldn't just pick up and start from the word I stumbled over. They would go back to the beginning of the paragraph or the sentence, clearly for an edit point, clearly so it made it easier for the editors to make it look like it was a seamless flow without, because it's very difficult to edit if you've just stumbled over a word and you pick up straight again. If you go back to the beginning of your sentence, beginning of your paragraph. So many of the talks you watch are edited. You're seeing the edited highlights. So try not to compare yourself to them too much. They are pretty amazing, some of them, but they are not always the off the cuff kind of thing. And then, like I say, they're very, very heavily rehearsed, like word for word, most of them. I don't always advocate for that. I think when you're doing a 4 or 5 minute talk, you kind of realistically have to, because you can't afford to and ramble and whatever. And I'm very good at going off topic and rambling a little bit and kind of not sticking to my point. And so when you're doing such a tight talk, you kind of have to. The problem with that is that if you lose your place and you're on very rigid kind of script, it's easy to panic because you feel like you need to get to an exact point to restart again. Whereas if you're just loosely talking around a topic, it kind of doesn't matter so much. You kind of roughly know where you are in the talk, and you can kind of. So just bear that in mind. Like, most of you will feel the need, and I totally understand, to kind of rehearse it word for word, but it's really important to be able to not stick to that too rigidly. Because if you can only deliver this talk in its exact scripted format, then you're setting yourself up for failure, unfortunately, ever so slightly. We kind of covered this really. I was just going to say sort of, that, in some respects, it's an unattainable goal. TED used to have the sort of tagline of ideas worth spreading. But now they've kind of changed to ideas change everything. I'll actually read something that Chris Anderson, the founder of TED, says. It's essential to emphasize the significance of ideas that inspire and drive change rather than merely adding to the stream of information. The new tagline underscores TED's dedication to presenting ideas that matter and can lead to meaningful transformations. So there's a couple of things in that, and these guys have thought about this to a huge degree. Ideas that inspire and drive change. So really want you to think about that. What's the change? Rather than merely adding to the stream of information, and God knows we all have more than enough information at our fingertips. And underscores TED's dedication to presenting ideas that matter and can lead to meaningful transformations. And again, this is about change. It's about changing your audience. Otherwise, they're just going to go, that was interesting, and kind of forget it. So we'll come back to that in a bit. So TED's official guidance, it's a starting point, really. Why is that not working? There we go. Is it new? There's a real temptation just to go over old ground because you know it works, because you've seen other people do it. And it doesn't have to be like, it just needs to be new to that audience, right? None of you are necessarily inventing quantum space travel or anything, but it has to be new to that audience. Is it interesting? Obviously, a slightly what's the word I'm looking for here? Subjective thing. And is it factual and realistic? TED historically, in the early days, particularly had a little bit of a problem with pseudoscience and people making claims that couldn't really be backed up. In fact, one of the talks I went to at TED Global in Geneva was amazing. And it was around really, really amazing, charismatic guy. And he basically was talking about like personal farms and like little boxes, hydroponics. You could grow anything, but you could download recipes. So if, for example, you lived in an area that needed extra vitamin D, so say you lived in the Arctic Circle, then it would allow you to grow, say, carrot seeds or whatever with the amount of light and water and heat that would generate extra vitamin D, and so therefore your carrots would have extra vitamin D, and so you could almost like have personalized farm and grow items that were relevant to you and where you live and whatever. And he did this amazing talk. Unfortunately, he'd made all of it up, and they found out. Well, I think the theory was sound. It's just that they were nowhere near reproducing what he said they'd done. And he got found out a year or two later, and his talk got taken down. It's actually my favorite talk of the day, and I was like, "Wow, this guy's amazing! Brilliant talk." But actually, he'd made up most of his data, sadly. So, just going to have a reminder of a couple of bits and pieces around how to choose your talk for those of you who are still struggling. Are you genuinely interested in this? Are you an expert? We're going to come back to that in a second, put a pin in it, because you don't necessarily have to be an expert. And will it provide value for the audience? So again, coming back to that bit, it must provide value for the audience. It's something that sometimes is easy to forget when we're just talking about something we're passionate about. It's got to have value for the audience. So some of us will be thinking about the expertise bit, and I suffer from sort of imposter syndrome quite a bit in some situations, and I know that some of you will. But a friend of mine, Kat, is She's a science writer, and she does occasionally does some bits and pieces on Radio 4 around science communication and whatnot. Um, and I was toying with the idea of writing a book, a factual book, a few years ago. And so I ended up on a call with Kat, and I was picking her brains, and I was like, yeah, I kind of feel bad. I've got this imposter syndrome. I'm not an expert. I don't really know a huge amount about this subject. I'm just really, really interested in it. But I said I know more than most people in the street, but I don't feel like I'm an expert. And she was like, great. She said, that's even better because when you think people like John Ronson or Louis Theroux, they don't present themselves as documentary makers and book writers as experts. You are joining them on their journey of learning and discovery. And that's really, really powerful because you can either present yourself as like Stephen Hawking, I am the expert, I know everything about this subject. Therefore, I will bestow upon you with great, uh, is it beneficence? I'm not really sure if that's the word I'm thinking of, but I will bestow upon you my great knowledge. Or you can say, you know what? 6 months ago, I was like you. I knew nothing about this. And I have learned, and these are the things I have learned along the way, and these are the people I've talked to along the way. And people often prefer to learn from someone who's just a few steps ahead of them. It feels more relatable, more, oh, right, okay, well, I was like you a few months ago, and or you were like me a few months ago, and therefore I can develop your level of knowledge. So just think about that a little bit. Just think like maybe there is a way in which you can communicate that is uh, not so totally reliant on you being an expert. I'm gonna whiz through these next bits. We kind of if you are presenting yourself as an expert, just a few quick questions. Does your audience believe in your expertise? Don't end up delivering a lecture. Remember, there's a difference between a lecture and a story. You can't just reel off facts. And sometimes reeling off facts is a sign that you're trying to prove your expertise. You're trying to convince people that you're an expert. If you just give them one more fact, they'll believe that you're an expert. Um, Keep it simple, focused, and wrapped in a story. Um, if you are presenting yourself as a learner, present your journey to understanding. It's really good if you've got imposter syndrome. And remember, that process of learning can be interesting. It's okay to present yourself as someone who is a little bit. If you would love to see a good talk about this, there is a talk called How I Fell in Love with a Fish, which is a TED talk. And it's a chef who is trying to find out a little bit more about fish cultivation for his restaurants or something. It's been a long time since but again, he knows a little bit about it, but he has to go on this whole journey. It's really, really lovely. So we've talked a little bit about stories, but it needs to be bound together with an argument. If it's just a series of facts, if it's just your personal experience, it is not a talk. It is just me just telling you about some stuff. I'm going to whiz through these last. There's a series of super quick slides here, so I'm going to whiz through these. Some basic, bigger concepts. That's a fairly obvious one, but a thing becomes shareable if it's a story. Again, you wouldn't say, "Oh, don't eat those berries over there." You'd be like, "Oh my God, did you hear about Abby and Bryn?" A story has characters, it has heart, and it has a shape. Something we'll come back to, so you might remember that. Obviously, shake and fold. We all remembered that, right? And he was like, "Oh, how many times do we shake our hands? 12." And he's like, "Well, I don't know, 12 disciples, 12 zodiac signs, whatever." What are those? What are those things? So whether it's acronyms or visuals and infographics, I know these are things that you won't be able to use, but like, what are the bits that are memorable? Because if something's memorable, it's easier to share. your job is to change their mind, or at least give them a thoughts about something they didn't have before. Um, and again, Joe Smith changed our minds and how we wash our hands, or how we dry our hands specifically. Um, Using emotion in talks. I know some of you probably will end up talking about personal stories and whatever. I won't go into this too much because it's a very complex topic around delivery, but there is something called mood contagion. If somebody's super excitable or super energetic, you will catch some of that. So be mindful of that. It's a really, really powerful tool, but you also need to be mindful of the fact that it can be a dangerous tool as well. If you are talking about something which inevitably, because of your jobs, you'll be talking about some quite serious topics, you need to be careful of that. And you need to think where you're going to leave people. Are you going to leave them? And it's okay to talk about serious topics, of course. It's the nature of your work. You're very literally dealing with life and death. But you have to be careful where you're leaving your speakers, your audience, because I think it's quite possible sometimes to just um, leave people feeling very kind of down. But storytelling really helps. We talked a little bit about shape, and we're going to come back to that again in a moment. I think we did an exercise last time, which is a little bit around um, picking one core idea. What's the tweet of your talk? Don't If your talk can only be conveyed in one sentence, what is it? And stick to that. It's very tempting to go, and then this and this and this, and also, oh, maybe you could do this, and this is really one core idea. What's the one thing? If you could craft it as a tweet. And also, if you try and convey too much, you make it much less likely people will share that, right? Every single really, really powerful talk has a single powerful message um, that people remember. And really, in some respects, you're just kind of repeating that. Like really, really, if you go back to Ken Robinson's talk, all there's lots and lots of stories there. They all serve one central message around creativity and education. Um, what's that one core idea? Again, we talked a little bit about novelty, but our brains are trained to look for new things. Like it's again, it's an evolutionary thing, or something that stands out. So give them something new. Don't just kind of, do those. Don't just do the same thing. And that can be a gimmick like Joe Smith had. That certainly caught our attention. If he'd done it without a prop, maybe we wouldn't have noticed. I'm not suggesting props because I don't think Abby and Bryn would fancy being your sort of stage hands for the day, handing you fake clown shoes and brooms and laptops. But what can you bring that's novel that makes people's sort of novelty thing ping? Um, Signposts. So I don't know if everyone remember last time anyone watched Ocean's 11. It's been a long time since I saw it, but like filmmakers are very good at this because they also realize they've got to have your attention for like 1, 2, 3 hours, right? Um, Ocean's 11 does a really good job at this. It says there's a planning section, right? We're going to do this heist. We're going to rob this casino, right? But they keep coming back to it when they've achieved each stage of the heist, and it's got a obviously massively convoluted kind of heist movie, whatever. They come back to it and they go, right, we've done stage one, tick, and there's a flashback to the planning scene, tick, done stage one, and then flashback to stage two. And these are signposts, right? You want to use signposts because otherwise people get lost. And also, don't forget your audience particularly on the day, when you have your sort of final events. They'll have listened to several talks in a row, so you need to keep reminding them that they are where they are in the story. Um, and that sense of anxiety, like obviously it happens much less now because we've got Google Maps, but You'll remember years ago driving and not being 100% sure where you are. There's a sense of anxiety in your chest, right? I'm not 100% sure where I am. Even if you're like, okay, we roughly going in the right direction, but there is security and a sense of comfort knowing where you are. Um, you need, and it does. There's nothing wrong with bringing people back and telling them, oh, right, okay, so remember, the reason we're saying this is that, and draw those lines for people. Make sure people know the reason you're saying this thing is because of that thing, right? It doesn't matter. Like it's much better to over signpost than to under signpost. Um, so twists and surprises are good, but you don't want to confuse people. Um, Many of you will have milestones in your stories. Think of those as potential for using signposts. If something interesting happens in your story, that's an opportunity to demonstrate progress. Have a signpost. There are also, very quickly, I don't want you to feel like you have to try and be the ultimate TED speaker, and there's a very particular type of TED talk and style. And actually, there's some really good sort of takedowns of that, and sort of it's become almost a style. Embrace your uniqueness. Be you. Like, don't. I won't go into this in any great detail, but like I've seen some amazing talks from people who really broke the mold. They were very, very different, just because they were unique. And they didn't try and be the kind of big inspirational speaker. They were like, I'm going to tell my story. I have no idea why I put an owl in here. Sometimes I look at my slide and what was my decision making process there? An owl. Anyway, but it's the why around our ideas that makes them spread, not the how. Otherwise, you're just saying, and then I did this, and then I did this, and that. Why did you that? And that again, that brings us back to the signposting bit. Why were we doing this thing? Does it affect your? Why does it affect your viewers' lives? Most of you have heard of the 5 whys, right? You ask yourself, why am I telling this story? Okay, fine. But why am I doing that? Okay, well then, and asking why 5 times really helps you dig down. If you haven't heard of the 5 whys, then, go and have a look, dig it out, Google it, and apply it to your talk. Okay, we're coming towards the end here. Okay, great, or at least of this bit. See what resonates with people. Like I say, you can just practice it in front of the mirror, but this is about testing, not about practicing. I want you to think about the core, because your 5-minute talk or whatever will be made up of multiple sort of 30-second chunks. And you can try those 30-second chunks with people. See what resonates with people. What questions do they ask? Try it with each other. Like this is, I think we did an exercise last time, like delivering our talk or small versions of our talk, and then seeing what questions it triggers in people's minds, what resonates with people. It's really, really, you can do it in a coffee queue. Like it doesn't have to be like in a formal setting, a formal question and answer kind of thing. Try it around the house with whoever you live with. And so we are going to very quickly remind ourselves of the structure and shape thing. We do a couple of exercises and watch a couple of short videos around this. And the difference between a lecture and a great talk is, again, story. And stories have shape. We saw the Kurt Vonnegut thing, video where he was doing all the thing. I'll remind you of that in a sec. Yeah, so we don't gather around campfires and tell facts, right? We tell stories. So just a quick reminder, these are some of the shapes that Kurt Vonnegut talked about. You'll remember him scrawling on the board. Rise, then fall, then rise. Fall, then rise, then fall. Is that? Yes. So we're going to do a very quick sort of 5-minute exercise here. I want you to either get a bit of paper or you can do this on your laptop, however you want to do it. And you're going to do basically have 2 sections, before and after. And you're thinking of your audience now. I'm going to give you sort of five minutes or so to do this. I want you to write down what your audience think about your topic before your talk. And they may not think anything. They may not never have considered it maybe a really niche topic, or they may have a vague concept if you are someone in the street. So try and imagine that. What do they feel about it? Do they have any emotion about it? Is there anything that comes up in their chest? Are they doing anything about it? Is this something that they do? Maybe they don't. Maybe it's just something they have no awareness of or concept of at all. But you really want to try and get into that state that they have. And then I want you to, on the second half of the page or whatever, I want you to write afterwards. What do you want them to think about your topic? What do you want them to feel? What emotions do you want in their chests when you finish speaking? And then after that, what do you want them to do? So the first 3 questions are before, the second 3 questions are after. Almost like the 10 seconds before the talk starts and the 10 seconds after imagine those 2 emotional cognitive states. I want you to just map that out. So I'm going to give you sort of 5-6 minutes just to write that down. And, if you want to just write a handful of words or you want to write, excuse me, something more detailed, go ahead. Just like get it out. Just think about what they were like 10 seconds before your talk and what they were like what you want them to be like 10 seconds after your talk. Do you want them to be energized? Do you want them to run out the door and want to change the world? Like what are these emotions? And what practically do you want them to do with what you've given them? So yeah, we'll come back in 5 minutes. I just put myself on mute until then. Maybe another 60 seconds on that. Okay, so hopefully now you have something that will something to aim for. Um, oh, sorry, Molly. Let me just quickly read that. I just think. Uh, that's okay, Molly. We've got one of the sort of discussion groups later will help with that if you're still struggling to click with the topic. Um, but yeah, I can understand if you haven't really found anything yet, then that might be a bit more of a tricky thing. But just something for you to then revisit as you have found a topic that you want to revisit to talk about. Um, it's a framework then for you to, when you've sat down and you've written your topic, your first draft, you can really ask yourself, like, does what I've written here, or what I propose to talk about, is it going to leave my audience feeling like this? Are they likely to go and do anything about it? So yeah, I totally understand that, and one of the discussion groups later will definitely help with that, hopefully. So uh, so yeah, just keep this simple task in mind. If it's not something that you could do or you feel you can do effectively right now, try and come back to it once you have a topic, and certainly revisit it once you've written that first draft. When you kind of think about it, like what's that outcome you want for your user. So we you'll remember this, hopefully. We talked about this structure that Nancy Duarte uh, sort of discovered about great presentations, and there's a difference between the what is, the current state, and the what could be, the future state, and the new bliss. She sort of ends on, and that's kind of what we're talking about with this kind of how do you want them to feel before and after. Like you're trying to get them from feeling about the what is to the what could be, that sort of new bliss. So I'm gonna play a couple of clips of Nancy Duarte talking, a couple of minutes each. One is from a TED talk she gave, and then another that kind of talks a little bit more about, sort of reflects on that talk and why it worked. We're not going to watch the whole thing; we're just going to watch a couple of minutes of each. But I just want you to think about how your talk could fit into this kind of framework. Let me know if you can't hear this. Hopefully, you can hear it okay.
Well, I love this shape. So we talk about shape. Story has an arc. Well, an arc is a shape. We talk about classical music having a shapeliness to it. So I thought, hey, if presentations had a shape, what would that shape be? And how do the greatest communicators use that shape, or do they use a shape? So I'll never.
Sorry, folks. I'm just gonna see if I mute my microphone. I just want to make sure that you're not hearing it twice. Or does it sound good? Actually, is it rather than overcomplicated? It just sounds good, does it? Okay, fine. That's right.
Never forget, it was a Saturday morning. After all this study, it was a couple years of study, I drew a shape. And I was like, oh my gosh, if this shape is real, I should be able to take two completely different presentations and overlay it, and it should be true. So I took the obvious. I took Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, and I took Steve Jobs' 2007 iPhone launch speech. I overlaid it over it, and it worked. I sat in my office just astounded. I actually cried a little because it was like, I've been given this gift, and here it is. This is the shape of a great presentation. Isn't it amazing? It's crying. So I want to walk you through it because it's actually pretty astounding. There is a beginning, a middle, and an end, and I want to walk you through it. because the greatest communicators of all time, I went through speeches, everything, actually I can overlay the shape. Even the Gettysburg Address follows the shape. So at the beginning of any presentation, you need to establish what is. You know, here's the status quo, here's what's going on. And then you need to compare that to what could be. Now you need to make that gap as big as possible, because there's the commonplace of the status quo, and you need to contrast that with the loftiness of your idea. So it's like, you know, here's the past, here's the present, but look at our future. Here's a problem, but look at that problem removed. Here's a roadblock, let's annihilate the roadblock. You need to really amplify that gap. This would be like the inciting incident in a movie. It's when suddenly the audience has to contend with what you just put out there, and they have to say, wow, do I want to agree with this and align with it or not? And then the rest of your presentation should support that. So the middle goes back and forth. It traverses between what is and what could be, what is and what could be. Because what you're trying to do is make the status quo and the normal unappealing. And you're wanting to draw them towards what could be in the future with your idea adopted. Now, on your way to change the world, people are going to resist. They're not going to be excited. They may love the world the way it is. So you'll encounter resistance. That's why you have to move back and forth. It's similar to sailing. When you're sailing against the wind and there is wind resistance, you have to move your boat back and forth and back and forth. That's so you can capture the wind. You have to actually capture the resistance coming against you when you're sailing. Now, interesting, if you capture the wind just right and you set your sail just right, your ship will actually sail faster than the wind itself. It's a physics phenomenon. So by planting in there the way they're going to resist between what is and what can be, it's actually going to draw them towards your idea quicker than should you not do that. So after you've moved back and forth between what is and what could be, the last turning point is a call to action, which every presentation should have. But at the very end, you need to describe the world as a new bliss. This is utopia with my idea adopted. This is the way the world is going to look when we join together and we solve this big problem. So you need to use that as your ending in a very poetic and a dramatic way. So.
And I'm just going to move on to another talk she gave several years later about this talk. That's a bit meta. And she talks about it more within the context of business presentations, but it's all totally related to what we're talking about.
I'm not getting any sound on this one, Neil.
No.
You say there's no sound?
No.
Oh. That's very odd.
It does
Looks
have
like it's
the
muted
mic
at the top.
at the top is muted. Next to closed captions at the top one.
It's coming through my speakers, but not through yours. That's odd. Okay, let me go back. That good?
No, not for me.
Yeah, no, nothing. I don't know if anyone can hear it.
Nobody
say
else can
now.
hear that. That's really odd because it's coming through my speakers, so I just would assume that you would be able to. How odd. Okay, let's have a look. So.
When that video is playing, it just looks a bit more glitchier than the
Say again,
previous
sorry.
video we watched. When that video is playing on the screen, I'm also not getting any sound, but it just looks a bit more glitchier than the previous video that we watched.
This is very interesting. I wonder why. Okay. Wonder what. Let me just quickly see if there is a way in which I can solve this. If not, I won't labour the point because I don't want us to spend hours solving a technical issue, but there might be a way in which I can quickly solve this. Let's have a quick look.
Yeah, if it doesn't work, Neil, can you just if it's a YouTube link, just send it around and
It is just a YouTube link, yeah.
People can watch it in the break or something, or tonight.
Yeah, what I'll do then is let me just how frustrating. Okay, well, in which case, what I'll do
Presentation. What I share in my TED Talk is a presentation
Does that
framework
work?
that I discovered after
Yeah, I can hear
analyzing
that.
hundreds and hundreds of the most popular speeches and presentations of all time. Everyone from Martin Luther King with his I Have a Dream speech to Steve Jobs with his launch of the first iPhone. Now, the patterns were largely the same, and I actually even used that exact pattern when I delivered my own talk. And so the framework is an adaptation of the 3-act structure, which is one of the oldest and most tried and true story structures in history. And this framework also has worked wonders for hundreds of customers who went on to see incredibly successful product launches. It has helped get teams fully bought into new vision and directions from their CEOs, and it has scored multiple nine-figure contracts because of the power of the sales decks. And that's just the beginning. This framework is at the core of our entire business. And here's a quick look at what it is and why it works before I show you exactly how I used it in my TED Talk. The traditional 3-act structure divides a story into 3 parts or acts. You'll commonly hear them called the setup, the confrontation, and the resolution. Act 1, the setup, it's where you introduce the hero, the villain, and the main conflict. It gives your audience the lay of the land, so to speak, so that they know who's who, what the setting and the rules are in this world that you've created. And it prepares them for this upcoming conflict that's going to happen in Act 2. So what I discovered is that in high stakes presentations, you need to focus on what is, or in other words, you need to focus on the status quo, but you need to do it in such a way that it sets you up for Act 2. So you need to paint a picture of what is, so that the middle of your presentation, there's a clear link for the audience that the current status quo is actually causing a conflict or a roadblock between them and what could be of what the future is that they want. So I'm going to dive into this more in a second. But the key part in any good keynote or pitch or product launch or anything is that you need to create the conflict early. Now, most presentations make a critical mistake in Act 1. And unfortunately, most of the time, they actually don't realize that they're making it until after they present. They make themselves the hero of the story instead of their audience. Now, it's easy to do this accidentally because you're preparing a lot. You have to say a lot. And because you're putting so much work into it that you're trying to communicate ideas that you want your audience to buy into and to believe in. But the key is thinking through the problems, the pains, and the goals of your audience and basing your whole presentation around them. Again, I'll be showing you how I did this in my TED Talk here in a minute. But for now, let's move on to Act 2. It's in Act 2 that the confrontation happens. Now, this is all about contrast. You've spent your introduction building up this momentum, focusing on what is and the status quo. Now, you're going to contrast that with what could be. This is where you introduce more characters, more obstacles that they face, and things get quite a bit messier. And people often refer to this as the messy middle. Conflict creates intrigue because the audience wants to know how these characters that they've grown attached to are going to overcome circumstances that seem quite a bit dire with each passing second. So in presentations, this is where you create a bigger and bigger and bigger gap between where things currently are and where things could be in the future. And you want this gap to be as big as possible. And that's because what could be is tied to what you're presenting, whether it's a product, a new direction for your company, or a sales pitch. Now, this is often where your entire presentation can fall apart if you don't do a good enough job at creating the contrast between your vision and the status quo. By linking how your vision is going to help them get to the future they desire, I promise you your presentation will not inspire anyone to do anything. And I don't mean to sound harsh. I just want you to know the truth. This is where everything can fall apart. Now, most high stakes presentations fall in this critical area in one of 2 main ways. They either focus way too heavily on data and statistics, making everyone's eyes glaze over because they are not drawn in with a story. Data and logic have their place, but they are only effective when strategically used inside of the story. You're not trying to convince a robot that your way is the most logical way. You are working with humans who've been drawn into story since the dawn of time. The other main way presenters fail to create contrast is by doing the typical sales pitch. Everything's amazing. We are the best. Nothing can go wrong.
that humans are inherently risk averse. We are much more concerned about what we could lose versus what we could gain. So while we want to focus on the great things that are coming and the what could be, they won't mean anywhere near as much unless you contrast them with the real problems that people are facing right now. Now, these two scenarios boil down to not doing a proper job of creating meaningful contrast between what is and what could be. Magic happens when you paint a vision of what's possible. Acknowledge the real challenges, show them how your vision or your solution can help them overcome those challenges. And then act 3 is where everything comes to a resolution. In the story, this is when the guy gets the girl, when peace is restored, everyone lives happily ever after. But oftentimes an audience is left with themes or a big question to ponder. It's very similar with presentations, except we always want to end with a very clear call to action. In other words, based on everything that happened in the presentation they just heard, you have a decision to make. You either stay where you are in the status quo, or you do this specific action that's going to take you to this great future that holds out for you. And you just lay it all out really clearly. We want our audience to see the deep contrast between what is and what could be, and be left with a really clear choice. Your presentation should always come full circle. Starts with Act 1, and then Act 2 addresses their problems, needs, and goals. And then it ends with Act 3, showing them that there's a choice they get to make that's going to help them overcome problems and move toward their ideal future. Now, we have.
So I don't want to get too bogged down in the actual structure of what she was talking about, because, like I say, there's loads of different ways in which you can structure a talk, as you know, we saw from Kurt Vonnegut before. But like, I do want you to think about sort of that, what she was saying about either getting too bogged down in statistics, and also the other thing she said was like the other common mistake is the sales pitch. Now, obviously, she's talking about this very much within a business context, but the equivalent within what we're talking about is maybe just talking about your story too much, or framing. She talked a little bit about sort of what are the pains of your audience, like what are their pains. Now, they may not know they have a pain, but you're presenting them with something that is going to offer a solution to a problem maybe they didn't know they had, or certainly a different way of thinking about things. So just reflect on that a little bit about, is this a sales pitch in some way, and are you just presenting a load of data and statistics? So I'm going to give us a quick break now. I'm going to say like 10 minutes, come back at 20 past, and then we'll do a short exercise, and then we're gonna do the different discussion groups, which will run. So some of you will just, most of you will just attend one. So I'll see you at, say, 22 minutes past 10.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Okay, hopefully you're all coming back. Bryn, if you're there, make yourself known. I'm going to ask you to do the splitting into pairs shortly. Oh, I can't hear you, Abby, if you're saying anything.
Yeah, I was on mute. I always do that.
That's all right. Bryn's not back. I'll wait for Bryn to get back. So I'm going to need him to split people into pairs.
Fabulous.
Why has that stopped working?
Excuse me, I am back. Sorry, I was just on baby duty while my wife
that's right.
was doing a toilet break.
you're very much forgiven. So in a second, I'm going to ask everyone to split into pairs if that's all right. Just if that's easy enough. Is that okay to do, Bryn?
Yeah, I've done the rooms already. So just to explain, everyone's split into pairs apart from the room in Swansea, who are, I think, a room of 4. So organise yourselves. So
okay.
Nathan, because I know you've joined as well, you'll be like unassigned, but everyone else should have a partner. But we'll be here in the main room. So if any problems, come back to the main room, and we'll reassign. So Neil, whenever you're ready, let us know.
Just in a minute or so. So one last way to look at this is through the sort of lens of a gift exchange. People in your audience are giving you their time, their focus, their energy. What are you giving them back? And it may not be something they can use, but it's nice to give people a gift anyway, right? So our exercise now, actually, Bryn, is it possible once we've assigned them to into the pairs, if we bring them back, is it easy to send them back into those same pairs again?
Yes, they'll default in these pairs now.
Great, brilliant. All right, well then let's do this. Yeah, it's a last minute change of plan, but I just thought of something early this morning. I think this would work well. So what we're going to do, we're going to take 5 minutes now, and what we're going to do is you are going to spend 2 minutes each doing the potted version of what you would like to talk about. I know for some of you, you're not really there yet, and that's okay if you're not. Like, you can either think of something off the cuff, or you can just listen to the other person. But so if you are listening, you have 2 jobs. One, you have to set a timer for 2 minutes so that and let them know when 2 minutes are up. And you also just have to really listen. Really try and listen to what they're telling you, and then swap over. So in theory, this whole section should take 4 minutes, and then we're going to come back, and then I'm going to give you another task. If you need to make notes, that's not a bad idea either. So when the person is talking, so you're going to keep them to 2 minutes, maybe give them a sort of 30-second countdown sort of notification. They've got 30 seconds left, and then you're going to swap over, and then we'll come back, and I'm going to give you something else to do. And if you need to make notes, that's all the better. So whenever you're ready, Bryn, if you can send people into pairs. And by the way, I'm going to be really strict about the 5 minutes. So you have to get started pretty much straight away. So quickly choose who's going to go first. Someone listens and takes time, and someone gives a 2-minute version of their talk. This is a bit of a high pressure situation, but you're gonna have to live with it. So all right, so you've got 5 minutes starting from now.
Okay, fingers crossed this works. It's always a bit dodgy, but here we go.
Yeah, no worries.
And I don't know if you guys have seen, but we've had a couple of messages in the chat about people who have stepped away for various calls or
no worries.
whatever. So I've put I've just left them in the main
That's
room with us, and if they turn up, I'll put them in together.
okay, cool. No worries. Cool, good stuff. So, yeah, we'll bring them all back in 5 minutes. Then we'll give them another short follow-on task that's based on this, and then we're running a little bit behind my proposed schedule, so we'll have to work out the timings in a moment when we've done this. But I suspect we'll basically have about an hour and a quarter left to do the three workshops. So what we can probably do is break that down into so what's that? 75 minutes. So we do 30 and 25 and 20. So in order of whatever. So we'll go with the no idea first of all, and we do that for 20 minutes. So what I need to do actually is tell people. So from a technical point of view, do we want people to log off and then come back, or do we want to just say, look, stay logged in, just mute and camera off, or whatever?
I
I'm
think
just
I think keep them in the conversation, because even if they're like, for example, if we start with the group who have no idea and want to come up with an idea, then there may be some pearls of wisdom from the wider group around.
Oh, right, so just keep the whole thing open as one big group and do
yeah,
that.
yeah, but just as you say, like, okay, this next 20 minutes is specifically for the people who. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I don't think there's necessarily. I don't. Yeah, I think there's people might just want to listen in, which might help. Like, but I think what I want to do is make it conversational. Like
Yeah.
I'm not just going to be like talking at them
Talking
again
at them.
for
Yeah.
So I suppose
why don't you give people permission to step away if they don't feel that section is relevant for them, and then that's
yeah,
like an ad hoc break, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely,
And
and
they all
that
have
that's
that, then naturally, whichever category they fall in. Tim and Tanya are in a room together but not connected.
That.
Yeah, so I just said, can you hang up and rejoin?
Man, the breakout rooms on Teams are a gift that keep on giving.
So let's say we go 10:45 to 11:05. So that's 20 minutes. And then 11:05 to 11:30. That's 25 minutes. And then 11:30 till 12. That's, yeah, that all works. Okay, cool. All right, that's fine. Yeah, just I'll do it that way. So we just have it as one big group. People can mute themselves, step away, take a break, or even leave and come back. Okay. So yeah, 10:45 to 11:05 will be no idea. 11:05 to 11:30 is like we just need some guidance, some extra discussion, and then 11:30 till 12 will be the need refining and stuff. I just need to think about how I it's almost like there's a natural flow, like people can almost come and just drop in. Just thinking how to make it a better discussion. Yeah, okay, that's fine. That's all right. Another 30 seconds or so, and we'll bring everyone back, and then we'll do another couple of minutes, and then send them back into their pairs for the second stage.
Shall I give them a 1 minute warning?
Yeah,
so we
if
can start wrapping it?
you can, yeah, if that's easy, yeah, go ahead. they can come back whenever you're ready, Bryn.
Okay, 1 second. Welcome back, everyone.
Okay, everyone back. Good. Okay, so the second part of the challenge really is to go back into your pairs now. Now that you've heard the story, or hopefully you've heard a short version of the story, I want you to go back into your pairs and want you to ask each other. And I'm going to give you another 5 minutes for this, another 2 minutes each per sort of speaker. In the order of which you gave your talks, I want you to the person listener to say, "So what? Why does this matter to me, the listener, or to the NHS, or to our department?" And the speaker must then answer, but only in one sentence. And then once they've answered in one sentence, you say, "Now what?" So you're asking, "So what?" Then now what? Effectively, what do you want me to do differently tomorrow because of this? And again, the speaker must answer in one sentence. So what? Answer in one sentence. Now what? Answer in one sentence. So I'll tell you what, I'll bung this in the chat actually from my notes, might make life easier. So that's so what? And again, you're answering in one sentence. So head back to your pairs, if that's all right, Bryn. And then I'm going to give you another 5 minutes, but again, 2 minutes per thing, per story.
Yeah, and if you're having trouble connecting in your rooms, just come back to the main room, and we'll try and sort it from there. That's probably the easiest way. All right, see you guys in 5. Abby,
Yeah.
do you know who that person waiting in the lobby is?
Let me have a look.
Should we admit them and see who pops up?
Yeah. Maybe Tanya. Let's have a look.
It's Tanya.
Is it Tanya?
Yeah. She has to join from her phone. You right, Tanya? Can't. I don't know if she can hear us. Hello, Tanya. You guys, nothing, getting nothing back? Nah, it's not just me then. Okay. I've shifted up to my attic, which is an absolute pigsty. But we have the health visitor coming around in 20 minutes, and it's going to cause all sorts of chaos. So. Oh, you're on mute, Neil.
Can we drag everyone back now? And then I think we're should be good to have a quick discussion, and then we'll crack on with the sort of group discussions. Right. Does anyone want to sort of bravely volunteer what they learned, or if they learned felt anything in particular about that? Yeah, just anyone want to bravely step forward and talk about that exercise? Nobody? Go on, Hugh.
I had some really good feedback from Jess, so I'm going to give her a shout out there. She listened with interest and was able to give me some really good pointers on what I need to do to, I suppose, to make that what I'm trying to, my story resonate a little bit more. So yeah, that was really, really helpful.
Anything
Things that maybe I hadn't considered.
Anything specific that you want to share? I mean, you don't have to, obviously. You but is there anything?
I guess I'm talking about a subject that maybe I've got quite a lot of knowledge around, and maybe my sort of not expectation, but my outlook is that maybe people know as much about it as I do, and it's probably maybe worth having a bit more background around that so that people are on the same page rather than just going in and assuming that people are at the same level that I'm at with it.
It's really difficult when
really
when you're pitching to, or when you're speaking to a mixed insight audience, for want of a better phrase. It is really, really difficult to do that. You know, you don't want to patronize people, but at the same time, you don't want to assume everyone's got the same knowledge. Brilliant, thank you. Ria, is that you've got a hand up?
Me. Yeah, hi. So I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to talk about, unfortunately. So it was really great to listen to Sarah, and just in that really short snippet of that 4 minutes, she really inspired me and was very thought-provoking, more so than what I thought I was going to take away from that conversation, actually. And she just opened up with milestones of her story, and it really resonated with me. She really sort of took me through a little bit of a journey in the short space of time that we had. but I could see each of her milestones, how the narrative was changing, and how at the end we came to a call of action about being brave. It was about, promoting equality, diversity in the workplace, connecting, working together, dropping those barriers, and how we invite that as a culture. So a lot of, I suppose, the discussion really resonated with me from a cultural lens, from a workplace. So I almost wanted to ask her to come and do a talk for me in my own work environment, because I just felt really invested in how powerful, I suppose, what her call for action was and what the message was. So thanks,
Great.
Sarah. Just you've inspired me.
Sounds like Sarah has got it nailed and needs no more further support or help, and she can go home and take the rest of the afternoon off. Brilliant. No, that's really, really lovely to hear. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, great job. I can't wait to hear Sarah's talk. Sounds brilliant. So does anybody, before we kind of move, so we get the next hour and a quarter is basically we're gonna have 3 different discussion groups depending on where you are in defining and writing your talk, and I'll kind of come to that in a second. But before we go to that, does anybody have any questions? Like, is there anything else that's come up over the last like hour or so, that kind of that you have questions about, or you have any queries, or you want to? I'm just scanning through people looking for hands up.
Yeah,
If
Jess has
not,
got a hand up.
has she?
Jess, yeah.
Go on, Jess.
Yep. Hi. Just a query about the kind of breakout groups and basically, if we are currently, so I put down that I don't have any ideas, and that I want to, like, I'm in that group, but I'm conscious that in a few weeks' time, I might then feel like I would have been better placed in group 2 and would benefit from those conversations. Are the kind of prompts or whatever we're doing in the next activity going to be shared so that we can then move on to the second group's activities when we're ready in our own time? Am I making sense?
No, you're making total sense. It's a really good question. The way we're going to structure it, they're very much discussion groups. There's no real activities. It's just people
Okay.
bringing their kind of. It's just an open forum, for want of a better phrase. What we're actually going to do is we're going to leave the room open. So it's almost as if you've been paid to lead me into making this point. So thank you, Jess. You've kind of led me into it perfectly, like a stooge or something that's been paid to ask the perfect question. What we're going to do is they're basically just going to be a series of open discussion groups where people can come with their ideas. Maybe other people want to listen, they want to feedback. You know each other better than I know you as well, so maybe you've heard each other's ideas and talk, so you can perhaps help. So you can stay for the whole thing if you want, for the sort of next hour and a quarter, or you can just dip into the bits that are relevant to you. So the first bit we're going to do, and we're kind of already slightly over time, so I want to get us into this, is we're going to do 20 minutes for those people who just have no idea, right? And they just want to just have we'll have some provocations around that, and I've got some questions and stuff I can ask you, but generally open discussion. So until 11:05, we are going to talk as an open group, anybody who has no idea about what they want to talk about, or they still haven't decided. Everyone else, you can do whatever you want. You can either mute yourself and turn the volume down and just step away. It's either a break, a chance to work on your talk. What I would do is I'd recommend that you use any free time now to use any insights that you've developed now and really dig into your talk. So use this sort of upcoming hour for that. So then at 11:05 until 11:30, it's people who have kind of decided on their topic, but they kind of don't really know where to go next with it, or how to structure it, or what angle to take on it. And then from 11:30 till 12, actually I should just write this in the chat to make it easier for everyone. 11:30 till 12, we're going to talk with those people who've kind of written their first draft and maybe want some kind of more nuanced feedback. So let me now until, I'm just going to very quickly write this in the chat, now until 11. Sorry for the keyboard sounds. 11:05 to 11:30. Decided topic, but need more guidance. And then finally, 11:30 till 12. Those who've written first draft or similar. So it's going to be an open discussion. I've got some questions I'll ask you, maybe some points that will help, but I'll be leading those discussions, but it's entirely up to you how you choose to oh, Cornelia's just preempted me. There we go. Perfect. Great. So we'll crack on now. Because we've only really got 15 minutes for the first bit, but I think it's probably the smallest group. So anybody who has any questions around that, we're going to start straight away. And then you've got the timings there. Oh, sorry, 11:30 to 12. Yes, thank you, Bryn. Thanks for calling that out. Yeah, I don't know how I managed that. Yeah, and I just dip into the bits that are relevant to you, and we'll take it from there. So, and obviously you have my email address. I'll give you that. If you have any sort of specific queries that you don't want to bring to the chat. So, let's get started then. So, Jess, maybe seeing as you're front and center in my screen as the last person to have spoken, do you want to talk to me a little bit about what you're thinking about? What your or do you just have like no idea whatsoever?
I kind of have an idea, but it's not really an idea. It's just when kind of prompted to think about what I kind of care about. It's hard to explain. I basically, like, when it comes to kind of what you bring to the table and what you kind of think is important, my thing is like being a joyful presence in work and like the impact it can have. And so, but to me, like the way I describe it is just kind of like being the sort of vibes or like the hype person. But I just think it's important to still be able to have a good time in work, and you can still work hard and be a personality. But I'm kind of stuck for whether that is something that resonates or is important, I suppose, and how to kind of frame it as a story.
Okay, well, I mean, you've got a couple of things there. I mean, I think it sounds great, by the way. I love it. I think it particularly important. You could look at the kind of that so what and now what framing. I think that would be really, really helpful, because I think particularly with a talk like this, it's kind of a bit of a no-brainer, right?
This is the thing, is that it is a kind of so what. Yeah, it is like a well, sort of duh kind of thing.
So can you frame it like, so you've got there's two people involved in this. Or not two people, there's there's you as the sort of central protagonist, but then there's also like the other people in your department who may not be bought into your joyful approach to stuff. And not everyone's got different personalities and people approach this stuff differently. But is there a way in which you could frame this as like, we talked about obviously the Nancy Duarte thing of like you could almost tell a story of a day when you weren't joyful, or because obviously it'd be really easy to pick on someone who is like a real grumpy presence and kind of describe them as the kind of the existing thing, but that would kind of perhaps be a little bit unfair. But is there a way in which you can
I wanted to kind of frame it as an opportunity in a sense of my own experiences. So in terms of, oh, sorry, Lewis, I've just seen you got your hand up. I'll just finish this and then I'd be grateful to hear your thoughts. I guess my reflection was that kind of by bringing my sort of more joyful self to work has only kind of brought me positive opportunities.
Yeah.
and has kind of made me connections. You know, so one of my examples was going to be I recently interviewed for a job, which I got. And when I got the job, the interviewers said, you know, just make us one promise. You'll always remain as positive as you did in that interview.
Great.
And so I kind of wanted to use, you know, say that basically bringing your sort of true self to work, there will be people who kind of, you know, aren't, maybe don't click with that, but if you continue to do it, you will kind of bring yourself positive opportunities as well.
So I'm almost going to offer some contradictory advice to what I suggested earlier. So there's the thing about, you know, we talk about why, not just how.
Mhm.
But for you, for us, the why is really, really obvious, right?
Mhm.
Maybe there's a case for the how. Like, here's my 3
Yeah,
tips for being more
yeah,
joyful in work, right? The very, very explicit how.
yeah, okay.
You know, and it again, it's a sometimes a personality thing. Obviously, you're someone who is naturally, or maybe not naturally, maybe it's something you've worked on. But like, what are those tips that you can bring to the table about how?
Yeah, I like that.
You know, that's Lewis. Sorry, actually, let Lewis, because you got your hand up, and also Bryn's got his hand up as well.
It was just something to think about, Jess, would be, so interestingly, an interview question, a consultant job interview the other day, not mine, but was, how would your colleagues describe you on a bad day in work?
Okay.
And actually, like, as in, yes, you can be positive and bring good vibes and good energy every day, but also that's really hard, and you're going to have a day where you're not at 100%, isn't it? So it's like, how do you then adapt, and what are the things that you can do to then be like, okay, yeah, I'm not on 100%, but these
Yeah,
things help kind of continue those, you know, that good feeling, and continue those
yeah,
things that you really want to. So just something to think about. I just thought that
yeah,
might be
yeah.
relevant
No,
to
I
you.
like that. Thank you, Lewis.
Cool. Bryn, you had something to say.
Yeah, just a really quick provocation. This is clearly something that you're conscious of doing, Jess. So I'm assuming that there's been a point in your career or your life where you've decided this is how I'm going to act when I'm in work. So the story could be, when did you make that decision and why?
Okay,
Yeah, great, love it. Yeah,
thank you.
really, really good. I'm conscious we got very limited time, and what I think it's really instructive to hear other people going through this. Is there anybody else? I mean, if there's not, we'll come back, Jess. But like,
Yeah, no,
is
it's
there
been
anyone
really
else?
helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great, good. Thanks, Lewis and Bryn as well for your input. That was really, really valuable. Anybody else who wants to bring something to the table or has any thoughts?
I would say that something that we get like a lot and have done throughout Climb is people have an idea or something that they think they want to talk about, but kind of in the way that Jess prefaced her idea then, they don't think it's like worthy of the
Yeah.
stage. So do you have any tips on that, like kind of overcoming that sense of imposter syndrome almost, Neil, for your topic?
Yeah, I think there's just an understanding that not every talk can be like you should. I think the problem, like I think I alluded to, is like there's a real. I think with TED and framing them around TED Talks, and obviously TED's just one angle, but like you don't have to change the world with your talk, right? I think that's a real pressure. And actually, if you just make a 1% difference to someone's day on a random Wednesday in the future around how they approach a particular subject, it doesn't have to have a structural fundamental change to every aspect of their life, right? It can be next time they are washing their hands, right? Which is accounts for a tiny percentage of our lives. You know, it's 30 seconds, you know, 5, 10, 20 times a day, whatever, right? But, and, you know, if you then say just public toilets as well, you know, it's a tiny percentage of our life. So you don't have to be thinking about something that is going to make huge fundamental structural changes. It can be something as simple as, you know, how you deal with a patient when taking blood, or, you know, whatever. How you know, how we deal with talking about the menopause, you know, these are all kind of talks I've seen in various circumstances, and you know, it doesn't they're not talks that will basically be quote unquote useful on a day-to-day basis, but they will have some impact for someone at some point. So don't worry too much about trying to be fundamental, structural in your, you know, in the changes you make for people. Think more about, like, you know, what is important to you. And it doesn't matter if that only resonates with one person in the room. That's all that matters. Can you connect with one person? So maybe then think about who's the one person you're giving the talk for, and give the talk to them. It doesn't have to be to everyone. It doesn't have to fundamentally affect everyone. Just like, who is the one person, and talk to them, write for them, decide for them. Zoe, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so for me, I'm not sure I'm brave enough to say what I want to say in a public place, because the audience will consist of Welsh Government and senior people. But so for me, I, for want of a better word, was the whistleblower in maternity services in Cohort Health Board, which led to a national review of maternity services in Wales and a £4 million investment. That's been a very difficult hill to. It's not something I'd like to say I'm proud that I was brave enough, because people talked about it everywhere, but not everybody raised concerns. Babies died, mums were injured, and it was needed. But actually, I feel exceptionally guilty for what it brought about, rather than proud. And part of the issue, I suppose, is that was around Welsh Government governance, organisational structure, all things that are now changing. But in reality, I feel like there's a big finger above my head that says it was her, she did it. And this was in 2018. So it was a very long time ago, and still we're having the repercussions in maternity care across Wales and the UK. But also, you know, we've got to speak up safely. And I question, so there's a couple of angles. I question, how brave would we be if somebody brought an issue to us? I had a brave manager who said, we've got an issue, Houston, we need to raise this. That went above the coup, it went above internal organisation, we had to go to Welsh Government in the end. Somebody to listen, because what they did was try and hide it. And actually, you've got to speak up safely, but how safe do we feel in the NHS in Wales to speak up? And I think that's, for me, is kind of the crux of it, because actually you speak up safely in your own organisation, to your own structures. I'm not sure how safe that is. And when you've got examples such as Lucy Letby, which we could all question whether she was guilty at all, people did raise concerns, and they had to apologise to her for raising concerns about her. So for me, it's kind of, do I leave that in a box and sit on it firmly? Or do I pick a part of it that is almost about, for me, the take home would need to be, you know, how brave are you? How brave would you be if somebody came to you and said, this is a problem and we need to do something about it?
What's the number one thing you learned through this whole process? Because it sounds insanely intense and stressful and difficult. Like, what's the one thing you learned? Okay, so let me say two things. What's the one thing you learned about yourself, and the one thing you learned about the organisation?
I learned that about me, that I was brave despite the organisation wanting to shut me up, and my line manager at the time. What I learned about organisations is that at that time, things can be hidden from independent members, from the board, papers were rewritten. So I wrote papers, they were rewritten to give a different narrative. So I think I lost trust in organisational function. And now what I've taken away is that I understand organisational governance, the role of independent members, the role that Welsh Government holds to that, and how clever the organisation was for about a year hiding the truth.
Okay, so I think you can talk about yourself in terms of being brave and whatever. You have to be very careful to frame that as not just like a story about yourself, right? Because it's
not important.
It is important, but it's very easy to fall into the trap of just talking about your own personal story, and unless there's a so what and a now what at the end, it can be the bit about the organization then is a question around, right, we're only part of the way there. We're like 10% of the way there where we need to be. Here is what we need to do to get the other 90% of the way there. That there's something there around, but asking yourself what you learned about yourself and what you learned about the organization is just in this process are just useful questions to ask yourself, for anyone who's kind of listening, really. But yeah, if you feel like there is still lots of work to do, and of course there's always lots of work to do, but like this seems like a particularly complex issue. Maybe there's something
I suppose the bit for me is about who are we as leaders, where would we sit? So how would we manage it today if somebody raised these concerns to us? Because actually people moved away from me, sidelined things, not me as a person, but me as a part of the structure that was looking, So although the people that stood next to me, or that might have been sharing information, were afraid for themselves, afraid for their employment, afraid for their pension, so there was kind of that. And I had a brave manager who said to me, this isn't right, and the organisation shouldn't be doing this. So where do we go next? But I wondered, if somebody came to me, how brave would I be in my role today to say, okay, how would we navigate this? How do I support you as a manager or leader?
Maybe there's a story to be told about your manager then.
Okay.
What good management looks like in the times of, and then you can take it away from yourself a little bit. You take a little bit more of the emotion out of it. It's about what this great manager did to support you, and what they, also what they could have done if they'd had, better insight, access to, whatever. But like, maybe the story is something around there, around them, rather than your story, because that's really what you want to do. You want to create an environment where people feel comfortable speaking up, right? And it sounds like there's a procedure in place, but like, really, you got to feel like your line manager's going to have your back, right? So ultimately, and then they've got to feel like their line manager's got their back. It's a domino effect, right? So I think we've got a hand up, and then we're probably Swapna, do you have your hand up, and then we'll probably have to move on.
Yeah, thanks. It was just very quickly in response to what Zoe was saying. It's just to say that as a member of the audience, I would feel that I think it's really good there are people who speak up when things are not right. That would be one of my first reactions, because that kind of gives me more faith in the system in a way. I just wanted to sort of put that there,
Great. Yeah, really, really good. Yeah, totally agreed. Folks, I'm conscious we're kind of running out of time, and it's just that unfortunately the nature of these things is like there's so much great stuff we can talk about if we had more time, but unfortunately the nature of it being limited. So I'm gonna move on now to sort of open the floor for anyone who kind of feels like they've got their topics, but they kind of feel like they just need some guidance, or they have specific questions around where to go next. So one thing I was going to say very briefly, actually, the sort of several quick provocations I noted down about the first bit about those people who have no idea is like your talk doesn't need to be about the worst day of your career. It can be about something that changed the way you lead or the way you think about your work. Ask yourself, what's the piece of advice you find yourself repeatedly giving to junior staff? And what is it? Your question that really unlocked something for someone on one of these programs a couple of years ago was like, what do you find yourself talking to your partner, housemate, friend about all the time? What's the bit that you moan about or you celebrate a lot? So, with that, so I'm opening the floor, like I say, to anyone who's kind of roughly know what they want to talk about. They want perhaps some more guidance on structure, focus, content. Does anyone have any thoughts around that? I'm kind of skipping through, seeing if I can find hands up. If not, we could perhaps come back to people who don't have any. Oh,
couple
go
of
on.
hands then.
Yeah, go
and Neil,
Go on,
first
Tristan,
from
yeah.
Laura Lee Thomas, and then from Tristan after Laura.
Go on then, Laura and Laura Lee, and then Tristan.
Hi there. Mine.
Oh, Laura, can you lower your microphone to your mouth? There we go.
Thank you. The what I wanted to talk about is a term basically. When I came back to work at the NHS after being away for a bit, I would ask about certain processes and ask why it was that way, and I was told it's historical, and it created quite a lot of rage in me, and I wanted to talk about like curiosity and its historical being binned as a term, and about how to do that. So I'm very comfortable with talking about the status quo and what it currently exists as, and the institutions we're part of, how important it is that they are in some ways historical because they have that solidity to them and that safety to them because they are those things. But then it's moving on to what so like what now, like when you said so what, I was trying to think of, it's like being curious about why things are the way they are and doing things differently and networking and things, but I don't feel like I've got quite the direction on what I'm trying to convey or what I'm asking for, other than to just stop saying it, which is not, you can't base an entire talk on
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I'd spend a lot of my career sort of battling against the kind of risk aversion and that kind of stuff. And maybe there's just a slightly different way into it, right? It's like I say, talking about risk aversion. You could perhaps look at past examples of where using it's just the way we've always done it has led to failure, or you could almost carry on the kind of the trend of like, okay, if we continue to do it this way, you almost draw that line, right? I mean, the medical history is littered with examples of innovation, right? That have just the sort of the astonishing innovation of washing your hands in between delivering babies. It's kind of those kind of seemingly at the time would have been like, oh, it's just the way we've always done it. It's just the way we've always done it, right? And we live in a time where, so I've literally just delivered a talk about this last week. So although, funnily enough, like despite the fact that I talked to you about delivering talks, and 90% of my work is around innovation, and I gave a talk last week about the fundamental nature of innovation within big organizations like government and the NHS is linear, or it's like there's a sort of fairly linear process of like planning for the future, doing it, and then reporting on it, and did it work, did it not work, blah blah blah. Whereas innovation happens in a very rapid cycle. We try something, we test it. If it does work, we do more of it. If it doesn't work, we try something else. We call the lean startup loop, or the sort of that sort of innovation loop. And the challenge is trying to, an innovation is increasing in speed. So the speed of innovation is accelerating. So the parallel I drew was, so lots of the organizations I was talking to are supporting innovation, they're supporting startups, they're supporting founders, they're supporting innovators. And I said, look back 30 years at the processes you used 30 years ago, and what's the difference between them then and now, right? And 9 times out of 10, it was like the process is fundamentally the same. They're just a bit more digitized. There's still a form to be filled in. There's still, there's still a application process to go through. There's a there's emails to be sent, but it's just digitized. It's the same thing, just digitized. Whereas if you look at innovation now and the speed at which we innovate, we build businesses, we build processes, it's unrecognizable from 30 years ago. Like building an internet business now is, and I say this almost without joking, it's almost a 15-minute job. I can get a fully functioning web app online taking money from idea to taking money in 15 minutes. And yet, if I wanted to apply for support from Welsh Government for that business, it's really not going to be that much faster than it was 30 years ago. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is if we want to change, things are going to change. Here's a little nugget for you that may or may not be useful. I think lots of government services, and this includes some of the parts of the NHS, are going to be circumvented and just kicked out of the loop by technology. And what I mean by that is there's a guy I know called Tim. Recently, there's an issue with if you have to change your address, there are up to 12 or 13 government services you need to inform. NHS, DVLA, Company's House, HMRC, whatever. There's all these, and you have to do it individually. And government have been trying for over a decade to find a way to link all these services up, so that when I just go to my government portal, change my address, and it goes across all of them, right? Still doesn't work. They've been trying to do it. They spent millions of pounds on it. They just can't fix it. This guy literally just set a couple of AI agents and said, he gave them a simple instruction: go into my email inbox, trawl through it, find any UK government service to which I am subscribed, go to their website, find out the address changing process, and change any addresses, log in, change any addresses from old address to new address. He circumvented entire government processes in something like 4 hours and 30 pence in AI tokens. So there is going to come a point where people are going to start to circumvent the NHS, right? People are not going to GPs as much because they're using ChatGPT for minor ailments. So I don't know necessarily that how that helps, but like what I'm trying to say is that innovation and change is happening ever quicker, and so you don't have a choice but to embrace innovation. And of course there need to be guardrails. Of course it's going to be more difficult. Of course it's going to be linear almost by its nature. But yeah.
That's great. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and actually I'm just kind of trying to scan the chat here. Bethany said something. I said, what about if you have any examples of change where a team has gone completely away from the way it's always been done and there's been positive outcomes? Yeah, if you can point to real life examples, it's always great. Anybody else got anything else they want to decide? Like they've got an idea, but they can't quite find a way to frame it or to structure it. Stick your hand up or shout out. Stick it in the chat.
I think Tristan was next, but he's
He
lowered his
was,
hand.
yes, beg your pardon. Yeah, totally forgot that. Yeah, go on, Tristan.
Thanks, Bryn. Thanks, Neil. So bear with me. So I'm thinking of sort of prevention investment or the left shift. So I think it's sort of known in terms of do more earlier on in the pathway and save more, prevention better than cure. So I had a few stories in terms of people that I know, and one links if it was screening, another sort of community, another link to my daughter, etc. My issue is, so I put the stories together and the 3 mini stories, but then it's the now what bit. It's the what am I asking as a call to action. And so, well, you can think about it a bit more, or have more awareness of it, or you can ask people to think about it. But I haven't really got that real grasp. But yeah, to then give me the passion to then say, right, this is what I want everybody to go away and do. Or maybe I've just missed the point and it's a bad idea and I need to look elsewhere. And that's sort of where I am.
So what? Okay, so you're saying that we want to shift to prevention rather than cure, or you want that shift to the left along the process and kind of get more, and obviously for understandable reasons, and it's a hopefully fairly well known and common concept within healthcare these days. So I suppose what's the unique angle on this? Is there I think hopefully everyone will be brought in. So maybe you're not bringing anything new by bringing it as just a big concept, but is there a unique insight that any of the 3 stories that you're telling can bring? Like, is there something that's or is there perhaps a trick that enables you to do that left shift more easily? Like, that's sometimes a thing, like, because also sometimes it's like, behavior change is hard, right? We all know this because I have this thing, it's like intent doesn't result always in action, right? We all intend to go to the gym tomorrow. We all intend to, be more healthy. We all intend to do the right things, but actually behavior change is really, really hard. So, what are those things that enable that behavior change? Because actually you're trying to convince people of something that hopefully they should already be fairly convinced about, right? It's like, or so maybe the novelty is not in that. Maybe the novelty is in the how. Again, coming back to this thing of like, we know the why in this instance. What's the how? And like the simple thing about leaving your trainers by the front door makes it easier to go for a run, right? It makes it 10% more likely you go and do the exercise or whatever that is, right? It's about removing those barriers. So it might be something that is like, is there anything in your stories that helps remove those barriers to shifting left? Bryn, you've got a hand up. You got a thought?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. This is an interesting one because I think in principle, a lot of people in health would say that they're in favour of shifting left, but like the way NHS Wales has been structured and governed for the last, I don't know, 20 odd years, maybe longer, it doesn't seem that that's the case universally. So like there's great pockets of community work, but like as a universal shift left, and Tristan, you work in finance, you know this probably better than anyone, like the predominant amount of like budget goes into secondary care. So yeah, that could be that. I don't know, that like your position, from your career could be an interesting, unique take on this, I guess. And the how could there be something around like better unlocking resource across silos to shift things left. But then the only other the small point I really wanted to make in terms of stylistically, and that this is personal preference, but it's just with the time that you have on stage to deliver this talk, I've often found that one story is more
Yeah.
impactful than a collection.
100%. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think that's something. Yeah, because I mean, any decent story will take minimum 30 seconds, and if you've got 3 stories, you've taken up a big chunk. So yeah, picking the one or maybe two that really nail your point. But yeah, any thoughts on that, Tristan?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I might struggle to make one big story rather than 3. So maybe I'm going down the middle on 2, which might actually work better. Yeah, the now what bit, if you think from a resource point of view, then I'm into the realms of the now what only links to a small number of people in terms of decision makers, and that's I struggle a little bit more on it. It just so happens I'm doing a piece of work in terms of describing how much of our resource is linked to different forms of prevention, etc.
Yeah.
But and unsurprisingly, yeah, secondary and acute is huge. It's just that
man.
now what? It's just that it's just that what people take away to go away with.
And
maybe it is the behavior.
There are way
change.
more
Yeah,
people with like financial decision-making power in organizations than we realize, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. So it could be like a call to action of being like, stop spending so much bloody money in hospital. Like, do you really need that 5th blood test, or do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I'm being flippant, but that could be a way of thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, because it kind of comes back to Jess's thing about actually being more joyful at work is kind of a no-brainer, but Bryn's point is like actually it kind of is a no-brainer, but sometimes people are resistant for lots and lots of reasons. We're all resistant to stuff that we know is good for us. Otherwise, we wouldn't, we would all go to the gym and none of us would drink alcohol, right? So, we've got a few more minutes left in this session. Sorry, Tristan, did you say something?
No, thank you both. Really appreciate it.
Cool. Has anybody else got anything they want to bring to the table before we kind of wrap up this session?
Yeah, we've got a couple of hands. We've got Keris and Nick.
Go on then, Keris. We'll do a couple of quick minutes on that, and then we'll go to Nick.
I think it's just a comment. Is that is all these things do sound like no-brainers. It's like everyone's talked about these things before. That's what it feels like. So mine is pretty much along the lines of, yeah, we should go to the gym more because fewer of us should die of cardiovascular disease, right? We all know the answers to that, but we're not doing it. So it's hard to find a sort of an original thought, isn't it? But I suppose you've got to find an original story to talk about something that is a no-brainer.
So
That's
so
the
then
challenge.
the micro bit has validity, right? So Joe Smith, his talk about drying hands, his talk is like he's not trying to solve climate change. Because we all know like that's a huge thing. We're all bought in on it, hopefully, and we all agree it's something we need to resolve. But he's not saying right. He's like, here's one tiny thing you can do, one tiny thing you can do that will make a difference. Because when you're in a massive organization, it's the 1%. It's the compounding 1%, right? It's 1% every day. You're not gonna sadly, organizations as complex and large, you can't make transformative changes overnight, right? But it is those 1%. It's those tiny, tiny bits. And it is about making those little changes. So yeah, the way you dry your hands is does have an impact, right? As Joe said, it's the and again coming back to the Obama talk, like if you can change a room, you can change a town. If you can change a town, you can change a country. If you can change a country, you can change the world, right? So what are those domino effects? But yeah, I agree. It's difficult, right? It is difficult, and you kind of got to bring it back to the personal, perhaps. You got to bring it back to some kind of or some kind of very, very small impact that you can have. And again, you don't have to change the world in this talk. It can just be something that is you've learned that's really, really useful, that, you know, like I saw a talk about years ago, it's always resonated with me or always stuck with me. An architect was talking about how we build cities. And he's like, unfortunately, the nature of innovation and change and social change means that city centres, not the suburbs where we all live, but city centres, you know, and this was a talk before COVID as well. So it's even more so, but the way city centres are used is changing. And so, but historically, we've built city centres for 100-year use. We'll build a building, oh, that'd be fine for 100 years. Like, but traffic's going to change and, you know, electric cars are coming and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, do we then start to think about, like, how do we build cities for 10-year use? How do we make city centres modular so that we can go, that building is no longer needed as an office. Let's turn it into apartments. Or maybe then we need to get rid of that road there because now we've all gone to electric cars. Few of us have whatever, right? But anyway, I'm never going to do anything around town planning. I'm never going to do anything around architecture. But I live in a city and I go to a city centre all the time. So it always stuck with me about, okay, how do we change how we think about city centres? Super quickly, Nick, you had your hand up, and then we should probably move on to the final group.
Yeah, I thought I had a question, and I've kind of thought I hadn't. I feel like I've got a story. I did, a big race that I did late last year was the Dragon's Back race, and I feel like I've got loads of it's a story in itself to hang stuff on, and I can think of like the little tweets, as it were. One I'm kind of getting more landed on is do the little things, and linked to St David's and Wales and all of that. I suppose I've struggling with I think you kind of talked about it. It doesn't have to be as big for everybody and land with everybody. I think I'm just wrestling with that, but I feel like I've got my snippet and I've got my story. I need some meat on the bones. Any advice for just mulling it over?
It's a tricky one because also, like as a middle-aged man who's done a handful of much smaller ultramarathons, single day ones, it's very easy to end up just kind of talking about, and it becomes a self-aggrandizing kind of thing, or what's the word? Sort of a pain diary of like, and then my toenails fell off, and then this happened, and then I started hallucinating, and I've watched my fair share of Barkley Marathon's documentaries, so I suppose that there's the classic kind of thing of what doing X taught me about Y kind of thing, and that's again, tried and trusted, it works and whatever. It's kind of a bit, I wouldn't say it's hack, but it's kind of like it's very easy to fall down a fairly traditional kind of the thing of like, but again, if it conveys the message, that's kind of all that matters. It just all it if you're not careful, it will be a vocal interpretation of one of those terrible LinkedIn posts that you see of, what feeding my daughter breakfast taught me about B2B sales, and it's just like, just like shoot me now. I suppose you've got to start from the end. Like ultimately, like what's the thing that you want to convey? Like you can hang a lot of things on Dragon's Back and stuff. Or that kind of experience, any kind of difficult challenge you can hang a story on, right? But like ultimately, you've like, what's the gift exchange? Like, what are they getting from it? Like, what's the and it might be that you have to start from the back. Like, you might want to talk about the Dragon's Back because there's so many rich experiences in there. Or maybe you want to go, there will be one moment. You don't have to talk about the horrors of the whole thing, right? And I've got a couple of friends who've done it, so I kind of I have a vague appreciation for it and have zero intention of doing the training required to do it. But there will be moments, right? It could be just as you crested a peak, or it could be just as you tripped and fell in a puddle, or whatever that is, right? So maybe start, rather than trying to pick the whole thing,
Yeah.
what Doing the Dragon's Back taught me about blah. It's like,
Yeah.
what was that one moment when the sun came up on the final day,
Yeah.
or crossing the line and seeing your family, or like, you know, I think that that could be like, maybe just try and distill it. Like there will be, you know, I've done enough kind of, like I say, very, very much smaller ultras, single day things, that I know there are many moments that I
Yeah.
refer back to that are funny or silly or annoying or painful, or, you know, whatever,
Yeah.
that kind of get trotted out when you kind of having your running bore conversations with your fellow running bore friends. You try not to bore people outside of the community too much with them, but, like, you know, we've all got those stories, right? But what are those? What do they teach us?
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe I think you maybe need to start at the end, right? And
Yeah.
find
Okay.
that bit, and then yeah, I don't know, maybe that's useful. But yeah, it kind of feels like, until you know what that is, and it may be that the Dragon's Back is just not relevant to it. You know, I just don't
Yeah.
I don't really know. But hasn't the company that does the Dragon's Back gone under? Did I read that?
Yeah. Yeah. Last week.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
a bit sad.
pretty sad. Let me just quickly see if there are any hands up. Sorry if that wasn't super helpful, Nick, but any hands up? No, I don't think so. Okay, we are gonna move into, actually, one thing I should say, while I've got all your attention, I've just noticed, I just had a pop up. I've got an operation tomorrow, a minor operation. I'm having a deviated septum corrected. As soon as I've got a bunch of NHS leaders here, obviously the NHS is famously known for its preferential and tiered treatment. So I was just hoping that someone in here works with ENT and they can get me upgraded to the platinum recovery room and the gold star service, tea and biscuits afterwards, please. So if anyone can just sort that out for me, I'd be really grateful. I know that the NHS is very, very kind of has preferential treatment for its star patients. So yeah, if you could sort that out for me, that'd be very much appreciated. And on that note, let's move to the final group. Those people who they kind of feel like they're there. They just need a tweak, or they need some kind of extra thoughts, insights, or just they can't quite work out a way to get from A to B. So anybody got? Let me have a look. See if I see some hands up. If not, I mean, I could just open, you know, we've got like 20 odd minutes. We can just open it to the floor for any questions related to anything. If nobody specifically has any questions about that particular stage, or they, you know, they've got their full first draft, let's just open it up to the floor. Anyone can ask anything, any questions, any feedback, any thoughts, whether you've got no idea whatsoever or whether you've got a fully formed thought. Sarah, go on.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm there with it, but I guess it's just, how do you then test it? Is it a case of asking some kind souls to listen and then see if there's anything missing, if there's any areas that need to kind of be stripped back or develop more? I guess is the next bit of it I'm a bit unsure of.
There's a couple of ways. I mean, you can just do the ask people to sit and listen to you, which is valid, and, you know, and whatever. What you're asking them to do is to write down anything they're not sure about. They're not, you know, and be very, very honest and blunt with them, with you. Ask questions. You know, getting them to ask questions after the talk is really, really important, because that's just like, it's just gold dust. Because what you're not asking them for is for feedback. Because if you say to people, how could I improve it? People will be like, and they may not actually give you particularly good feedback. They're just giving you feedback for the sake of it. But if you ask them to ask a question, that in itself is a really strong signal. Like if they say to you, so why are you doing that? You're like, okay, well, I obviously haven't explained that bit particularly well, or why is that important? Or I didn't quite, so get them to ask questions. So that's kind of more formal setting. I would suggest like there are loads and loads of opportunities. So your central point around like whatever your central point is, you can drop into conversation like, when you're just having coffee with someone, or just wait, you've joined a video call and you've got like 2 or 3 minutes before the somebody else joins. You're like, how do you normally deal with X? Is this something that you ever deal with? And just seeing what they say, like, so within the innovation stuff I do, I often do like customer discovery calls where you're trying to get to the bottom of people's problems and pains so that you can solve them for them, right? With the innovation, right? So the problem with innovation a lot of the time is we kind of, in our own minds, we think we know the right thing to do, but actually we don't fully understand the customer or the user pain. And so asking them like, last time you did this, so ask for historic examples. Like, so, say, you're talking about like, I don't know, let's say Jesse's talk about being joyful at work. Say that was your topic. You could say like, well, last time someone was really joyful in work, how did it impact you? And you get really, really good feedback that way. But just try, you can try little 30-second chunks of your talk and just go, oh yeah, I was, so say you have a central story that is your kind of defining element. You can literally just say like, oh, you can deliver it as part of a conversation. Like there is a, so somebody mentioned, I can't remember who it was. Somebody mentioned earlier, like the thing with Ken Robinson's talk. It sounded like you were walking past the conversation, right? And you could almost lift any part of his talk out and drop it into a conversation. It would sound natural, right? So like maybe just try that and just see you're looking at people's eyes. Like, are they looking for the exit, or are they really kind of leaning in, or their eyes like, oh, it's kind of a call and response thing. You're just looking for those. So you can do the formal test thing, and then ask them to ask questions. What questions do you have? And if they have no questions, that can be actually sometimes be a bad sign. Right? It's just like, I'm just not interested in the subject at all. But does that kind of help?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, Bethany, you had a comment or a question or?
Yeah, mine's another question. So if there's any comments about that, then obviously anyone else can go first.
Yeah, are you okay with that? Was that
Yeah.
Okay, great, cool. Okay, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, go on, Bethany. See what have you got for us?
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure I've got mine written. I've changed it around a few times. I suppose for me, and I know you mentioned it earlier, is kind of how if you memorize it as a script when you're on stage, that can kind of lead to potentially if you miss a bit or you can't quite, you can get kind of lost on stage. So I suppose my question is more about kind of practicing it now. Is it literally just as simple as kind of having some note cards and just keep practicing, keep trying it, ready for talking
Yeah,
on stage?
let me find my good friend. I think I mentioned this. I'm just finding a talk which I'll stick it in the comments. There we go. So, so I'm just get rid of that. So this is a talk from TEDx Wellington, I think. So you will very quick. I'll stick it in the chat now. TEDx Nelson. So DK is a good friend of mine. You'll get immediately from his accent that he is not a Kiwi, despite it being a New Zealand event, I think. He is a Valleys boy. He's a good friend. He's been bouncing back and forwards between Wales and New Zealand for a while now. And his talk has like, well over 1 million views now. Let me just have a quick look. How many views? Yeah, 1.2 million views. And he talks about this. And he's very much an advocate for, I think it's difficult with 3, 4, 5 minute talks because you need to be like tight, right? He's a bit of more of an advocate for being a bit more free flowing, but that's a little bit easier when you've got 10, 20, 30 minutes. What I would say is you need to build the scaffolding of your talk. And when I do talks like this, normally I will just write stuff down and then I think, right, okay, what are the main points here? What are the milestones? What are the signposts and the bullet points? And, you know, for a 5-minute talk, I might have 10 bullet points, 15, that are key points. So the way I would think about it is each of those bullet points should be a sentence. That if you just said that sentence, the talk would broadly make sense. So if you said those 10 to 15 sentences, it would broadly make sense, right? And that's the bit you're kind of memorizing. So it might be, you know, like your bullet point would be story 1, which is, you know, whatever, and then point 2, you know, but you're looking to build a scaffolding, and then from there you're able to fill in all the details and the ums and the ahs and the blah blah blah, you know, the kind of the kind of the color around it. But ultimately, like, you need that scaffolding, right? And that's where this stuff comes in. So I would watch DK's talk. He talks about, you know, bullet card and index cards and, you know, making notes and stuff. And I think I mentioned it in the first talk because I very specifically don't talk about how to give a good talk. Like my kind of my thing really is around storytelling, right? It's not about like how to stand on stage and project your voice and blah 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 and structure your talk. You know, it's more about like but DK's talk is a little bit more towards that. So I definitely would watch that. But yeah, I tend to just get a load of thoughts down, and then it's almost like when you've got those sort of index card, those kind of bullet points, you can kind of shift them around. Like you can, you know, don't try and write the whole thing before you know what the structure is. So like, okay, I want to say this, and then I want to say that. And remember, we watched a video in the first session that was like, there's the guys who wrote South Park who were like, you have to have linking words between each of your sections. Therefore, because, you know, if you just like this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens, it's just a sequence of events, right? But it's like, but there's got to have some causal link between each bit. You know, why is it? So when you've got your 10, 15, 20 bullet points, whatever, you can at least on a page go, okay, yeah, that bit, that. Okay, now I'm going to sit down and write the color, the sort of the detail, the bits and pieces around it. Does that help?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, I think just like building that structure first. So I know the way I normally do is I just write loads and loads and loads and loads, just get the ideas out, get the concepts out, no real structure. Then I'll read through it, write the bullet points. That's your scaffold, and then you go back and almost like rewrite it a second time. And for a 5-minute talk, there's and then in terms of memorizing it, you always have that scaffolding to fall back on. Because if you forget where you are in your script, you're like, okay, well, at least I'm like, I know roughly where I am, and if I do that, then I won't mess up too much and I won't miss out too much important info. Anybody else got anything they want to ask or discuss in these sort of final 10 minutes? Emily.
Hello.
Hi.
So I wasn't sure if to ask or not because without going way into it, but I've written pages and pages throughout the morning, also based on something that I've already tried to write, but have probably rewritten as well before this 4 or 5 times. And what you've just been saying to Bethany is really helpful actually, because I've got bits that I want to add into it. So that I can kind of try and put together. But mine seems to lead into something that I basically, because it's so personal, I don't want to exclude people. So it could fall into the realms of like feminism, but I don't want it to do that because that's not what it's about. So it's about how do you kind of make sure you include everybody, but it's still really niche and personal to me, so it has those undertones. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think.
I don't know if I am overthinking it, but that would
Yeah,
be in
yeah,
my TED
maybe. Like,
Talks.
I think, as long as there is like, we've all listened to, I can listen to Ken Robinson talk about his son without having a son, right? And I can still relate to that. Like, as long as I kind of feel that there is I'm being brought along for a reason, and that there is a reason for this. We did that exercise around, what do you want them to think, feel, and do? Like, so I don't necessarily think a personal story is a bad thing at
No,
all.
and
Like, I think.
it's the point of this, isn't it? We're bringing
Mm.
ourselves into it. It's just okay. I think it's the end call to action that I'm finding tricky to tie in.
Yeah, I mean, it's
everything.
interesting. Abby's just put in the chat that she said she was like this last year. She just ensured her use of language wasn't directly saying this is because I am a woman, if that makes sense. And I think, so
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I can listen to a talk about feminism without feeling excluded. I think, there's to some degree you have to trust that your audience are going to go along with you and trust you and listen to you regardless of whether it's relevant to them, right? I've listened to countless talks, of people talking about things that I have and can never have experience of, right? In the case of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I would have a little bit of faith in your audience, but just ensure that, like you say, I think the fact that you're thinking about it sometimes is like enough evidence that you're not going to fall into the trap of being exclusionary. Like, if you weren't thinking about it, then there's a risk, but the fact is it's in the back of your mind anyway. Means I would suggest means that you're aware of it, and therefore you're probably not going to do it by accident.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
But yeah, again, just bring it back to like, what do you want them to do or feel or think off the back of this? Because it's the nature of what the environment in which you guys work, there's inevitably traumatic stories. You're bringing difficult stories to the audience. It's very easy to bring those things, but whether it's positive or negative, it's uh, you just have to be careful that it's balanced. Whether you're talking about some mad endurance race or being joyous or some terrible thing that happened to a patient or to you or whatever. It's just like, that's fine, but just make sure that it serves the central thesis, your one sentence, your one idea, your central idea. As Hannah says, also it's okay to center your identity. It is part of the context that you need taken. Yeah, so that's absolutely fine. It's just like, what's the greater purpose that it's serving? And again, you don't have to change the world. You can just be, just make life better for one person in the room.
No, it's really helpful, and I think when I put everything together after this, I should be able to do that. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant.
Can I be really rude and not put my hand up, Bryn? Sorry, I was just thinking in terms of centering identity. I think sometimes we're so mindful and fearful of exclusion, we forget that part of our identity is inherently who we are. And if I was to discuss something in a way that suggested I was somehow minority based on the fact that I'm a white woman in Wales, that would be really disingenuous to what I was trying to put forward as well. But it might be specific to the area of business I work in. Ironically enough, social care, not really that unusual to find women hanging around. But in terms of I think we've got to be really careful that we don't hide something that actually is also part of that conversation in a way that makes it sound like it's a problem when actually it's part of the context we're putting it into.
Yeah. Bryn, your hand is up.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I don't mind, Hannah. It was a valid and good interruption and links to what I'm going to say next. But I would just encourage everyone to the other piece of theory around storytelling that we've already done is around public narrative. So that story of self, us, and now. And the key thing that any good story needs is a main character, right? And if you're the main character of your story, so be it. But to be inclusive in that context, it doesn't have to be about people having the exact same shared experience of you as you, but you can assume, as Neil says, that there may be some shared values in the room, right? And that's the practice of public narratives. You display your values without saying them explicitly. So if you're like, okay, well, my experience is this, and a value I have as a result of that is, I don't know, like justice or community or whatever, use that as a common ground to be inclusive, right? People have shared values even if they don't have the shared experience, but then just to sort of re-echo and hammer home the point is like, okay, but why? What's this in service of? And like, how do you want to, if you're building community with these people that have shared experience or values, what are you going to do with it? And like, what is the point of the talk? So, it's okay to be your own main character. And
Yeah,
like, as Jess
absolutely.
says, like, be your own hype man as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we all hopefully have lots of crossover shared values, and just because we differ in terms of identity doesn't mean we can't share those things, right? One last call. We've got a last couple of minutes before you guys move on to presumably your lunch break, and then whatever exciting stuff you have this afternoon. Okay. Well, I am gonna perhaps we got 3 or 4 minutes left. Bryn, Abby, is there anything you need to do in terms of admin to wrap this session up?
Sorry, I couldn't get my headphone done then. No, just a big thank you again from us, Neil. I see that you've popped your email address in the chat as well. Like Bryn said earlier, guys, he will be putting some sessions in and has offered some one-to-one chats, and we'll have some drop-in sessions which prove to be invaluable. And I hope everybody got something out of this morning, and whatever situation you're in, whether it's just coming up with an idea or have a ed talk ready, that you've found it really useful to kind of use this session. So nothing else from me. Bryn, do you want to add anything?
No, I don't think so. Don't think so. Only just to keep practicing and use each other to practice. You're all in the same boat, and we are all so different as a group of 34, 35 people that you can test your anxieties around being exclusive or inclusive, like with a pool from this group, and it would be a really good sample for the wider audience. So
yeah,
make the most of these connections.
Cool. Well, good luck, folks. I look forward to hearing more about your journeys as you progress through. There've been some amazing talks that I've seen over the years. I've been working with Climb on this, and it's always a joy to hear everyone's stories. Thank you for your time again this morning. I really appreciate it. It's always I know it's quite draining to be on a call for like 3 hours and pay attention, but thank you. And chocolate and flowers to Landock Hospital in the Vale of Glamorgan tomorrow morning, please. I don't know what ward I'll be in, but I'm sure you'll find it out. So thank you, folks.
Thank you, Neil.
Have a great rest of your day, and I will. I'll leave you guys to it.
Thanks, Neil.
Thanks, folks. Bryn, Abby, you don't need anything more from me. Shall I just log off, or you?
Yeah, that'd be great. We'll just give everybody their lunchtime instructions now. Thanks, Neil.
Brilliant. Cheers, folks. Take care. Bye bye.
Okay.